How to become more self-aware. This is the third part of a 4-part series on this idea of temperament. Today, we're going to talk to you about the green temperament and some of the key characteristics and attributes that make them so awesome. First, we're going to talk about love. Let me tell you this. It's interesting as I've worked with greens, this is one thing that'll completely identify a green, is that they don't have to have relationships. In fact, they don't even need relationships. So when it comes to love, it is actually a choice that they make. There are some that are perfectly fine going through life just being independently alone and highly competent throughout their lives. So love is not a need that they have. But when they do find someone that they fall in love with, don't know that you'd say they actually fall in love with, they more intellectually become compatible with. That's really the essence of a green. I had one guy and it's like, so how did you find your spouse? He said, I had a checklist. I'm like, you had a checklist? He says, yeah, I had a checklist. She met most of the checklists, more than the others, so I chose her. I thought, wow, that's a pretty sterile approach to love, but that really clearly defines the green and how they approach this idea of love. From an education perspective, you can't slow them down. They are the teacher's worst nightmare, but teacher's best student. How are they the teacher's worst nightmare when it comes to education? A lot of times they know more than the teacher. My son, when he was in high school, he came home one day, he was so frustrated, and he says, you know, Dad, my math teacher's an idiot. Pretty good statement for a green. I said, why is your teacher an idiot? He says, because she doesn't know how to teach math. I'm having to stand up and teach the class almost all the time so the students can understand what's going on. So they're great students because they're conscientious and they get good grades, but they're very, very hard on understanding and being tolerant of those folks that aren't as smart as they are. So that's how they work in the education system. As youth, it's really interesting. There's no difference from a youth perspective to a teen perspective to an adult perspective from the green perspective. They are competent, they strive to be competent, and oh, by the way, as a 9-year-old who understands a topic or something along those lines, they know more about whatever it is than I do. A couple of my grandsons are just amazing computer programmers at 10, 11, 12 years old. Their dad's a high green computer programmer. They love it. They interact with their dad on such a regular basis. So it doesn't matter that they're only 9 years old. They love the learning, they love the challenges. So youth is very challenging for them because they don't really necessarily associate with a lot of other kids. They're kind of looked at as nerds, right? That's what we call these greens. And they're identified as a nerd at a very young age. And here's the good news about it is they really don't care because they're really more concerned about their ability to grow and progress and gain knowledge and understanding. So how does a green participate in recreation? What stands out? What do they look forward to? Whatever it is, they have this pursuit of perfection. That's what it is. So whatever they choose to do, they want to do it the best. And what's interesting is that you will say you want to go, my son-in-law, I want to go golfing with you. He says, I don't golf. And then I find out for 6 months he's going golfing. Every weekend and throughout the week, he's going golfing, he's hitting golf balls because he doesn't want to go golfing with me until he can do well at golfing. So it's interesting where that's how they choose their recreational activities, is they practice and they work until they can get really, really good at it. And then they are really good at it. A lot of professional athletes, probably the best one I can say is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was a very, very high green and he perfected his sport, the top of his game. And that's what helped him to be as successful as he was. He just didn't settle. And that's what greens do when they pick this idea of recreation. The great thing about greens is they're visionary. That's the strength they bring to this idea of leadership. In fact, they're so visionary that they confuse a lot of the people that work for them, that they're leading. I was working in one hospital, and this hospital commander was one of the most brilliant men that I ever knew, a medical doctor, and he was so smart. And he would sit in a meeting and he would express the vision of where we were going as an organization. And when he was done expressing that vision, I'm not kidding you, everybody was sitting around the table going, we are all in, we are going, this is so exciting. And then he'd walk out of the room and we would all kind of look at each other and say, but he never told us how we're going to get there. That's one of the downfalls of the green leader, is they love the vision and creating this vision, but they don't like getting into the details of how we're actually going to do it. We'll leave that to somebody else. Well, if I don't understand that, then a lot of people were just waiting around for him as the leader to tell us, okay, great vision, but how are we going to get there? So there's some great strengths that they bring from a leadership perspective, but then also, like all temperaments, there are some great weaknesses that potentially could hinder their ability to be a successful leader. One of the main reasons why we're having this conversation, especially about self-awareness, is so that we can identify what are those strengths that we bring to the table and what are those weaknesses. So we'd like to invite you to click down below and take our assessment, figure out where your strengths are, and figure out where you might need to work and close some of those gaps so that you can be a better leader, you can communicate better, and some of the other ideas and things we're talking about here today. For Greens, work is play. They enjoy doing what they're doing. If they select the job that they're doing, they become the best at it. It's interesting though, from a leadership perspective, going back to leadership, I had one Green leader say, I never took a job that I wasn't capable of doing. So he had a very hard time understanding why anybody else would take a job when they weren't capable of doing it, which is basically all the other temperaments, right? Have you ever found yourself or someone you know in a job that they just weren't fully capable? Instead of learning to develop them, Greens, from their perspective, is they would never take a job unless they were fully competent in it or could be, and they expect that from other folks, from other people too. All right, coming down towards the end here, we talk about Greens from a communication perspective. We'll put it down to this one simple concept that says less is more. If you need to provide some information to somebody that has a Green, you need to communicate to them. Just tell them the basic elements of what they need, what they ask for. If they ask for 4 words, don't come back with 12. You'll lose your credibility with them. And sometimes they don't tell you they want the 4 words, but they only want 4 words. So that's one of the things you need to figure out as you're working with a Green, or if you happen to have the Green preference, you need to get better at. Again, one of those areas that we can look at improving. But communication is key in terms of being clear and concise, and that's how you can really value somebody from the Green that has a Green preference. All right, so from a Green perspective, we talk about motivation. Motivation is their ability to be highly competent in whatever task they're given. As you are a Green or somebody that has a Green preference, you need to be careful to ensure that whatever you give them to do or the assignments that you take on, that you can be sure to master that competency. Otherwise, they become very demotivated very quickly. So I need to know that from a personal perspective, of which I will tell you most Greens already know that. Like I said before, they probably wouldn't take a job that they couldn't already be competent in. They won't go golfing if they can't hit a golf ball. So finally, to close this out, we're going to settle in on what are the Green values? What are those things that really drive and motivate them? We know competence is key, but let me just give you a couple more that we can kind of close this out with. They love knowledge. They're knowledge seekers, and they strive to get as much knowledge as they can. They strive for perfection, for personal perfection. Not necessarily you being perfect, but them being perfect at whatever they're trying to do. And finally, they look for solutions. They don't go after and attack problems. They look at the problems and go after what the solutions are. It's kind of an interesting the way that their brain works. So wonderful humans, we need them. They provide so much to us in this world. And so in your personal and or professional life, Greens are there, they're needed, and they provide great resources to us to be successful in our lives. So we'd like to invite you to watch the rest of these series to really learn these 4 temperaments, gain a deeper understanding and self-awareness. That was the intent of why we started these videos in the first place. So we invite you to follow along, learn about these temperaments so that you can gain more knowledge and more understanding of your temperament and those around you so that you can help us on our journey of putting the human back into humanity.